General Manager Joe Douglas has done an excellent job keeping this team together, but his job isn't done yet.
Inside, and a beauty! Hall running free! Breece Hall inside the 10! He's gonna score!
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo, and today we're going to be talking about what can we still do to make this team better. This is nowhere near a complete football team. We aren't the best roster in football. We aren't the best team in football, but there are steps and there are things that we can do to push us higher and higher up that list. And the signing of Quinnen Williams was a great step in that direction. Keeping him on this team until 2027 is absolutely phenomenal. We all know that the defense runs through Quinnen Williams. When Quinnen Williams is on the field, we rank as the #1 team in terms of sack percentage. And then when Quinnen Williams is not on the field, we rank as the 31st team. So we know how important a game-wrecking interior defensive lineman like Quinnen Williams is. So does Joe Douglas. And he's done an incredible job building this team, drafting the offensive rookie and defensive rookie of the years last year, as well as the guy who probably should have won it if he was healthy all year in Breece Hall. Not to include the fact that we got really good use out of guys like Max Mitchell, and there's a ton of players on this team that have a ton of potential. Jeremy Ruckert, Zach Kuntz, Michael Carter, Israel Abanikanda, just a bunch of talent up and down the roster. I haven't even talked about the defensive side of the ball. Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald IV. Can we talk about finding Michael Carter II late in the draft in round 5 or 6? It was round 5, pick 154. He's done an incredible job building this team, but in a year that is so important, and this is a topic of conversation that you're going to keep hearing from the national media, which we're going to talk about in a different video later today, but from the national media, from Jets pundits, from Jets YouTubers, from really anybody involved. One of the most important things that you're going to continue hearing about, a theme that you're going to continue hearing about, is this is a very, very important year. Not just this year, but this year and next year. And that's because we know for at least this and next year, we have Aaron Rodgers on our football team, and we know how important the quarterback position is. Last year, we won 7 games with the worst quarterback play of all 32 teams in the NFL. And that was with having the #2 ranked defense according to PFF, the #5 ranked defense according to DVOA. So if we can sustain that defensive pressure and add a Hall of Fame quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, this team should be better, just straight up. But there are still areas that we can improve, and we're going to talk about some players that maybe the New York Jets, and some positions that maybe the New York Jets can go out and acquire leading up to it. We have $22.5 million in cap space, and while I do believe that a good chunk of that is going to go towards an Aaron Rodgers restructure, there is still going to be enough money in the cap for us to maneuver a couple of signings. I know a lot of people really want us to bring in Quan Alexander. While I understand the want for that from the fan base, I don't see that as the biggest priority. I think Dalvin Cook is already, that's done and dusted. He's going to become a New York Jet. But there's also Kareem Hunt and Ezekiel Elliott out there to possibly pad out that running back room. I really look at when it comes down to, what can we do? I really like to think about the wide receiver position, because we were really all in on Odell Beckham Jr. and DeAndre Hopkins is still available. Julio Jones is still available. Jarvis Landry is still available. There are guys that are out there that can, I believe, still compete at a really high level in a limited role. What if we gave Julio Jones the Quan Alexander treatment? He's not going to play a ton of snaps. He's probably going to be wide receiver 6, wide receiver 5, and it's just adding more veteran depth presence, guys who have been there, guys who understand how to win and have done it before, bringing them into the fold, and who can play at a high level. The safety room isn't done. It shouldn't be done. Adrian Amos is not a Chuck Clark replacement. It's just not. Will Parks is still available and out there, someone that we can go talk to and maybe bring in. John Johnson is out there. I know a lot of fans probably aren't going to love this, but LaMarcus Joyner is still available. And yes, while he wasn't the best safety for us, arguably probably the worst player on our defense last year, he knows the system. The safety room is a room that with Chuck Clark gone, I'm really scared of, and I don't know how we're going to handle this the correct way. I looked at even maybe a guy like Duron Harmon possibly coming in to fill that kind of role. There's a lot of options there. But I think the most important position on this team outside of anything else is going to be the offensive line and the defensive line. Gitmo Bob left a comment on one of my previous videos that said that the New York Jets' success is going to live and die with this offensive line. He specifically was talking about the tackles, and I totally agree with him. Right now, we have a really crowded offensive tackle room when you look at Dwayne Brown, Mekhi Becton, Max Mitchell, Carter Warren, Billy Turner, and then some other guys that we have in that room. But the reality is 3 of the guys that we're looking at possibly being starters all had injuries last year, and pretty catastrophic injuries. Dwayne Brown losing his shoulder, obviously to the torn rotator cuff, and thankfully playing through that. Mekhi Becton again with the knee injury, and while I want him to have a super successful career and like with the New York Jets because I can see how dominant he can be, the injury is still a concern. Max Mitchell, obviously with the knee injury, then compounding that with the blood clots, and it's hard for me to say I 100% believe in this offensive tackle room to be able to get it done. Now, while I'm not saying go out and sign these guys right now, there is a conversation to be had about bringing in or having at least a conversation with guys like Taylor Lewan, George Fant, Jawan James, guys that have played at differing levels of success, but can play the left side, can play the right side, have some experience with maybe some of the coaches that are in our system. And while I'm not saying go get them as camp bodies, you should, and I believe Joe Douglas probably has already done this, has had conversations with these guys' agents, because if someone goes down, I want someone in the building immediately to come in and pad out that room, because unfortunately, I don't really believe in Billy Turner, and I would rather not see him on the 53-man roster. But I think more importantly, the New York Jets should really look at addressing the interior of the defensive line and the edge room. When we look at the guys that are still available out there in terms of free agents, like specifically at the edge and the interior of the defensive line, there are still a ton of guys that I would be super interested in bringing in to possibly compete for this team, especially in a limited role. And while our edge room is one of the deepest in the NFL, that doesn't mean that there isn't room for competition. Remember, the expectation is that we're going to lose Carl Lawson and Bryce Huff after this season. And while I'm not saying to trade away those guys or to do anything with those guys, the fact of the matter is, if we can bring in a veteran who's done this and can play in a limited role and have him around for the next 2 years, that's going to provide continuity for this football team. And with guys like Robert Quinn, Yannick Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney, Shelby Harris, Melvin Ingram, James Houston, all of these guys are still out there and available and can come into this team and be a productive member of this team. But I think the more important position is the interior of the defensive line. Outside of Quinnen Williams, I have zero faith in any of those players to be partnered up as a combo of just those 3 players in terms of Quentin Jefferson, Al Woods, and Solomon Thomas. If you had to make a center 2 of just those 2 guys, I don't know how confident I feel about that. And when we take a look at the fact that guys like Akeem Hicks, Matt Ioannidis, Chris Wormley, Linval Joseph, and Ndamukong Suh, they're all still out there and they're all still available. And I think the best part is that their contract projections are going to be something very, very minimalistic. And while, like I said at the beginning of the video, this is a go for it year. This is an all-in year. And while Solomon Thomas is a great story, and while Solomon Thomas is a good locker room guy, he doesn't provide a value or a skill set that is better than some of those guys that I listed. I would prefer Matt Ioannidis on this football team than Solomon Thomas. Chris Wormsley, I think, provides a better pass rushing skill set as the fourth interior defensive lineman than Solomon Thomas. And that is where I'm at. And I don't care how much of a rotation we're going to see from Jonathan Franklin Myers and Michael Clemens on the interior of the defensive line. Those guys are edge rushers. And what I would like to see is the Jets address the interior of the defensive line now that we've got some money and we know what this team is going to look like in terms of spending. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget, we can still create cap space with a ton of players on this football team. Let me know what positions you're worried about for this football team and what would you like to get addressed over the next 5 days. Remember, we're going to be the first team reporting back, and it's soon. That's next week. Let me know in the comment section below. And last but not least, go Jets.